I was 10 when Battle of the Gods came out, and 11 when I finally got to see it in theaters. By that point, I had already exhausted all the Dragon Ball that was available. So when I heard there would be a new movie, like a new proper movie, I was stoked. I watched it alone in a packed theater and it blew my mind. Had it been the modern day, I would have said aloud, "We are so back," but it was 2014, so I internalized that sentiment. Then another movie with Frieza was announced, and even though it wasn't as good, I didn't care. I was 12. This Dragon Ball resurgence culminated in a brand new series, Dragon Ball Super, which went on from 2015 to 2018. I watched every single episode as it came out in Japanese, and then during COVID, rewatched the whole thing in English. So, 6 years later, where does it stand? I'm going to start off with a few disclaimers. In this retrospective, I'm going to look back at the role of Dragon Ball Super and how successful it was in achieving what it set out to do. Right off the bat, did Super live up to the original run? No. It furthered the story, rekindled some of the same magic, and serviced the fans, but it never broke new ground, or was as new and exciting or long-lasting as the original series. It got close, but it never really truly reached the highs, but that's okay. I feel like that's not what it was trying to do. I feel Dragon Ball had been long flanderized before Super even came out. The traits of the character show being exaggerated to ridiculous lengths, having screaming, over-the-top action, villains of the week for Goku to beat by transforming, it had already reached that formulaic point. You can partially blame the original series, mainly parts of the Cell and Buu saga, but those aspects had mainly been beaten into the ground by third-party content. The movies, which weren't adaptations of the manga, the filler arcs, the specials, they all started following this formulaic structure much more egregious and blatantly than the original run did. But fans, young fans especially, aren't really paying attention to how much Toriyama was involved in a certain point, or project, or which arc was filler and which arc was in the manga. So the long and over-dramatic fights, revolving door villains, last-minute Goku entrances, and most of all transformations, all became integral to the collective identity of DBZ as a whole. It was kids that would Google Super Saiyan 5 or watch fight scene AMVs. That was me, I used to love that. Of course, the new movies had to play it safe. Have Goku win and have new transformations, that's what the fans wanted. But after this initial break, you'd hope over the course of 131 episodes they would manage to form their own identity. So let's break it down. One thing that I cannot deny about Dragon Ball Super is that it was charming. Even when they were just recapping the movies in episodic form, the longer runtime gave way to more character moments that were just fun. Part of that is of course due to Toriyama's influence. I feel like that's what separates Super from something like GT. Everybody feels in character and the style feels more in line with the original series. And everything seems like a natural progression, whereas GT sort of started to feel like fanfiction. I think broadening the world was a good call too. Every arc seems to make the world bigger and bigger, which is very in line with the adventurous tone of the original series. Goku was a kid exploring the colorful world while doing some martial arts along the way. It was nice to see Goku have that same wide-eyed curiosity as he explores this multiverse of gods and kais. Which brings me to another one of the things I think worked very well: the new characters. Looking back, it was insane that at that point in the series fandom, they introduced new characters that were as popular as they were. Compare that to any of the new characters they tried to introduce at GT, which I can't even for the life of me remember any traits about. They were either hateable or forgettable. But Beerus and Whis were some of the best new additions to the series. They play off the main cast so well and bring their own unique presence to the series. It is the one way that the series stands on its own. It has its own identity because of these characters, however, it never becomes enough to carry a whole series. Obviously, we can't have too much Beerus and Whis because the show is not about them. The show is about Goku and, to a much lesser extent, Vegeta. Dragon Ball's identity has become a lot more about action and a lot less about adventure, so as a result, the strong characters get a lot more focus. Which is fine. I understand that there's an insane amount of characters and they all can't get screen time. My issue when they actually do get screen time is how it's used. The premise of the Tournament of Power was there in a tournament where the 10 best fighters of each universe must fight in a battle royale. It was a very serviceable premise for an arc of fan service. People like Krillin, Tien, Roshi, and even Android 17 are getting back into the action. And while that's a lot of fun for diehard fans of the series, it doesn't feel right for most of their characters. It feels like they're being shoved into battles when for the long time in the series they've been shown to not be strong. That's okay, not every fighter can be strong, but those characters shouldn't be used for their strength. Let me use Tien as an example. Tien gets to kick ass in the Tournament of Power and gets his moments. Those moments feel like a weak character being given a buff so that they can be given a cool fight scene. I don't really care about power scaling, but my issue is Tien was not been about being strong, he was always about his discipline, his determination, and his willpower. Compare that to his moment in the Cell Saga, where he knows he is outmatched, he is way out of his depth, but the situation is dire. Cell needs to be held back. Instead of fighting him and all of a sudden showing he's stronger than we've been led to believe, he uses all of his willpower to simply hold Cell back and annoy him for a few moments. He does so with a technique that we remember from the original series. Even at this point in the series, this is fan service done right. We know his body is breaking, we know he is so screwed as soon as Cell gets to him, but we know that he is unwavering, and that feels true to his character. This is why I think a big issue with the series isn't lack of character use, but the execution itself. I feel like Super had some moments of very hollow fan service that it got bogged down in. That's not to say all fan service was like this, but it definitely became noticeable in later arcs. Overall, those are some of the big issues, broad praises and criticisms that I feel about the overall legacy of the show. Dragon Ball Super gave very charming moments that felt very hollow in terms of fan service. But I think a good way to round out this retrospective and give a sort of concise estimate to the quality of Super, let's go arc for arc and see how likely I am to rewatch it and how much those arcs individually held up. To start off with the Battle of the Gods arc, it was a great reintroduction to the series. It had some great little character moments. I might be more prone to rewatch the movie because there were some very, very choppy animation scenes in the show, and the movie is just very, very solid. This sort of was the first spur of hate Super got when people started screen capping some scenes like this. Overall, though, it is a lot of low stakes and lighthearted fun. Resurrection F is where things sort of began to slide. It feels like a lot of dicking about. It feels like one of the original series movies, like the Cooler movie. The only fun thing about the arc is Goku stealing Vegeta's kill. Very forgettable, I would 100% skip. Now, on to the first original quote-unquote arc of the series, the Universe 6 Tournament arc. This arc makes the Super world even bigger and gives more depth to Beerus with the relationship to his brother. This is sort of contrived stakes with the Earth trade-off, but what makes the arc interesting is Beerus' stake in it. It felt like the two billionaire owners betting on their sports team, and the tournament itself is really classic feeling. It has the Monaka element to it, which brings to mind Roshi and Jackie Chun. It has the mentor relationship birthed in a fight, which brings to mind Roshi and Tien. And then there's Botamo, who just feels like someone Goku would fight in the first round of the World Martial Arts Tournament. The Kaioken moment was the perfect fan service, though. I can't deny that. I feel it was everything a fan would want at that moment. It had Goku use an old technique from early Z in fans that would lose their shit over the fact that they recognize it. And on top of that, it had this insane aura and color scheme when compounded with the Super Saiyan Blue, and to top it off as a technique where the user screams as loud as they can, it was perfect for any DBZ fan. The new characters were very interesting too. It is cool to see an alternate version of Frieza and the Saiyans. The character of Hit is very cool, and his time skip gives the final fight a fun obstacle to overcome. This isn't just strength based, it's a very short arc. It almost feels like the Fortune Teller Baba tournament from the original run. But it was a very effective way to flesh out the world and give Goku and Vegeta reasons to care about the multiverse. Goku wanting to fight strong guys and Vegeta forming a connection with Kaba, it gives them something to come back to for the rest of the series. The arc ends with a fun fight of Beerus pretending to be Monaka, and overall, it's a great way to end it. This arc was aggressively solid, definitely worth a rewatch. I just skipped the purple Vegeta part if you count that. Speaking of duplicates, we're on to the Goku Black arc. This one had a lot going for it. Mysterious introduction, reintroduction of future Trunks, and actual stakes that are in line with the larger worlds we've discovered in the series. Unfortunately, this arc drags on a bit too long, with multiple trips constantly to the future with plans that revolve around callbacks. Evil Containment Wave, and Potara Fusion, it becomes really stagnant until the last chunk where shit gets kinda cool, and then the Deus Ex ending, creepy relationships with Trunks and Mai, which has no completely settling way to look at it. Either Mai is a grown woman creeping on Kid Trunks, or she's a child being crept on by future Trunks. I like the way the arc is framed as a mystery, but I don't know, ultimately it feels like a weaker version of the Cell Saga. It has some really cool moments, but overall, world-ending stakes feel difficult when there's gods of destruction present. No matter how much they try to write around it, it just ends up feeling forced. Now, before this next arc, there was a pretty big filler break this time, with a really cool couple of episodes. Goku hires Hit to kill him so he can fight him at his best, and I don't know why, but the execution of these two episodes were pretty new for the series. I like what they did with it, and it felt like a good intermediary between arcs. I like Super mostly because their fillers are actually much more entertaining than the original run. They felt, of course, out of necessity, but the fact that we know these characters for so long, they had a much more charming slice-of-life aspect to them. But finally, the one arc that I feel really sums up Dragon Ball Super, faults and all. The Tournament of Power. A plot line contrived to simply be a vessel for cool, inventive world building and fan service. A large scope of this arc which builds up to somehow one of the most iconic forms in Dragon Ball history. It is actually incredible. What works about this form is beyond the look, it's the functionality of it is entirely unique. It was accompanied by an unforgettable theme, and it existed in such a high point in the series. This whole arc, the stakes are actually kind of smart. We know Goku will win, but like in the back of your head you realize that if Goku does win, then people that we've come to know like Kaba cease to exist, Hit ceases to exist, and all these other people we've seen in the tournament will too. It's pretty hard to care about the world ending anymore with this series, but putting all these other universes in this fucked up gladiator scenario really gives the arc a dark feel. Those stakes obviously didn't end up being as dire, but the ending was still surprising. Who would have thought that 17 would have won, and Goku and Frieza would have been the two to work together to knock Jiren out. That final fight scene is so hyped that there's so many moments it manages to overload the audience with just nostalgia and hype and sadness. This arc was Avengers Endgame for Dragon Ball Z fans. I feel like that's a pretty apt comparison I see being made a lot. Which is why I feel it is such a strong ending to the series. It makes it so that the arc as a whole is less compelling, and when rewatching you tend to just stick to certain episodes. It's not like I'm going to replay a bunch of the episodes with the Love Universe, but even that spawned such a badass moment. And when you watch the arc as a whole, the moment is satisfying because of how often they appeared, and little moments start to hit harder. On its own, this arc is pretty hollow, I'll admit. Even as a finale to Dragon Ball Super, or even the whole Dragon Ball series, it could be viewed as just decent. But it feels like something that was built up from all sorts of Dragon Ball media. It wasn't just a series, and this was the finale. This was a big finale to decades of Dragon Ball, with the manga, the series, the games, the movies, the parodies on YouTube, the memes about the franchise, while at the same time giving us these new characters that are true to Dragon Ball as a whole. One of my biggest qualms with this arc is that as a villain, Jiren is a little too generic. I feel like that statement has been made a lot, but I feel like a series like Dragon Ball shouldn't have such a forgettable villain. He had a cool theme though. But overall, this arc may be a little too long for me to want to rewatch in its entirety, but you have to respect it for what it is. Looking back at this script, I feel like I've described a very hollow and meandering show that doesn't really progress the characters in a series. Characters haven't really grown much, and at times it feels like Super was more of a fan service project than a continuation. But I wholeheartedly feel the essence of the original series was present. The sense of adventure was still subtly present, although it was amplified to a cosmic scale. The action was not too over the top, but had some standout moments which came close to recapturing some of that same magic of the original series. And as a fan, it was fun to watch. It succeeded in keeping Dragon Ball alive in many people's hearts. It was the last piece of Dragon Ball content I obsessively consumed, and it felt good. It felt fitting. For some people, this reinvigorated their love for the series or even initiated it. No matter how much I nitpick it or critique the little things, which I've tried to avoid in this review, I think it is impossible to say that this series failed. It kept Dragon Ball alive. It brought me some joy, and it felt true to the original series. Overall, looking back, I think Dragon Ball Super was a success.